Welcome to the continuing interview series for Anti-Imperialist America. I'm deeply honored today to have with my guest Ignacio De La Sol. Ignacio De La Sol of the Brown Panther Organizing Committee. I've met him through anti-war work. He's doing mutual aid work. I believe he's being involved with the current uprisings. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing good. Just got off another interesting interview. So we met. I met you, Ignacio de la Sol. I met you basically through anti-war work. When they basically killed that guy in Iran. You talk a little bit about that, what you were doing, the organizing you were doing.
Yeah. So it's funny actually. That's how I got linked up with the Panthers as well. Um, I after the U.S. government was basically saying we're going to go into Iran. Um, a lot of spontaneous anti-war effort movements took place. So me coming from my perspective, wanted to help build a coalition to organize that and make it more effective. So I reached out to a group of revolutionaries, and we all came together to try and coordinate a more structured approach in address the issue on multiple levels. And then after, everything kind of simmered down and fell apart, and people stopped paying attention, we I moved over to try and like reorganize and find out what's next. And then that's when I actually got linked up with the Panthers because Kwame Shakur participated with me in the anti-war effort, like the no war in Iran and everything. And he reached out to me one day and said, "Yo, I want you to check this out. Let me know what you think, and if you want to get involved, let me know." And then that's how I linked up with the Panthers. Actually, was through the no war in Iran movement that was going on. Um, yeah, and we had a lot of people from all over the country working together. We were doing protests and going through like downtown centers, just typical, protests. But I think that that was definitely a turning point when people started to really start to exercise a little bit more coordination um, and get more unified.
Right on, right on. Great work. I've been friends with you on Facebook. You've been doing some different stuff with me. We actually we started tried to start a leftist motorcycle gang, John Brown's Raiders, and that was pretty
Yeah.
cool. So I want to get you say you're a Marxist. At one point, you said you were a communist, anti-imperialist. You working with the Panthers. How can you tell us a little bit about your story? Like like what what have you what struggles have you been through? What has led you to this point? Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're coming from.
Word. So yeah. So I was born and raised in Detroit. I'm first generation Mexicano. My father came from in the Ejido in Sinaloa, Mexico, called Bagojo Colectivo. And he was the first member of our family to come over here. And then as I grew up, on my mom's side, her family kind of had a little bit more comfortability and wealth. And then on my dad's side, as well as my mom, because my mom was poor, she was more proletariat. My dad had a peasant background, and then he joined the proletarian force when he came to the United States. So I grew up in that kind of like atmosphere and definitely a lot around like the lumpen culture and everything. So my background was really uh, versed in like having an understanding of what everything looked like. So I had access to look at everything, from different perspectives. And at a very young age, I started to question why there was so much wealth disparity. And I started to do more research. I read Adam Smith, and then I got into Marx, and that was really foundational. But it wasn't really until I got into like Stalin and Ho Chi Minh that I started to really recognize things. And then later on in my life, it was, Mao Zedong, when I started reading more into him, that I became Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. But I mean, I would say that ideologically, I never really touched on anarchism. I kind of came into Marxism, and I would say that at that point I was more liberal than Marxist. And like I didn't understand a lot, and it took a long time for me to really understand things and the dynamic dialectical materialism, historical materialism, the colonization of mi gente, and all these different things. So over time, I guess, as things developed, what was really foundational was my recovery, because I used to be an alcoholic, or an addict. I'll say is definitely better, because I use drugs and alcohol. But through my recovery, I really dove headfirst more into studying about Marxism, and that was the turning point in my life, because with studying more Marxism, I actually started to engage more in, like, at that time it was community service. But then I was left at a point where I was like, well, community service, I'm not really doing much. I may be passing out some food or volunteering at a rehab clinic, but I'm not really doing anything to change the conditions that give rise to, what I'm experiencing, my people are experiencing, all oppressed people are experiencing. Um, and so that's when I became more radical, more revolutionary. And at an earlier age, too, I really got into the Panthers, the original Black Panthers, in particular. Fred Hampton was a big influence, Assata Shakur, Huey P. Newton, Bunchy Carter, all of them, they really came together for me, because they were talking about real revolution, here based on our conditions. And they made some mistakes, they made some errors, but ultimately they put forth, I believe, and I would argue, one of the most revolutionary situations in U.S. history, as far as this nation is concerned. And so, in studying that a lot, there was a point where I moved to Mexico to be with my family, get more in touch with my cultural heritage. Um, and over there, I started studying a lot more into the Panthers. And I remember thinking, like, I wish they were still around, right? I wish they were still here. Just like people say, I wish, like this person or that person was still here. Um, but I knew that, like, as an individual, I wasn't able to do much. So I just tried to find something where I could participate and contribute. Um, and I wasn't very dogmatic about it. I was, anyone who was trying to do something, I always approached it from the position, well, let's see the best in others and try to work with that, rather than, not working with people because of things we disagree on. Um, so in moving forward, I worked with, the Brown Berets a little bit. I never fully joined. I worked with some other, like, small time organizations. I tried at one point to join PSL, but it wasn't until I found the new African Black Panther Party that I really saw a party and their mass org, the United Panther Movement, that was doing everything, not just one thing. They were being dialectical, and they were actually putting forth qualitative leaps in theoretical understanding, and basing dialectical materialism on the conditions here in the United States, as well as addressing the fact that this needs to be a protracted struggle around the world. Not just saying, we need liberation in one country or for one nation. We need this all around. And that really ties into the idea of revolutionary into communalism. So I joined up with the United Panther movement, and I was just fascinated. Started doing community programs with comrades in the area. One of the programs that I was a part of was Community Aid Network, and that was organized with me and some other comrades. Shout out to Comrade Miyu, who is amazing comrade. They do so much, and they have so much love for the struggle and everything we do. And the can was a lot about, like bringing food, water, hygiene products, clothing to the people, and also trying to win over their participation. And it's different than just, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like giving aid, in like a liberal sense. But providing aid and then more, like bringing connections together, actually having some social investigation to understand what the needs of the people are, what they're talking about, the various strata and everything. And the Panthers helped me be able to do that on a larger scale. So after a little bit there, I joined up with one of the cadres of the Panthers, the Brown Panther Organizing Committee. And as a group of comrades right now, we're just an organizing committee, but the things that I've seen and we've been able to do together, and the things that the Panthers have been doing have just been foundational, extremely inspirational, like the 10-point programs, and then the work they do with families from stolen lives all over the country. I had the privilege and honor to fly out to Minneapolis and work with a lot of families out there. And Native Lives Matter. And there's a lot of points on that trip. I was tearing up myself because it's beautiful when you get to actually go out through this long process. I would say that I a revolutionary into community, separate myself from them, because one of the main things today that we need to do is unify amongst ourselves, because we have so much dysfunction, so much dogmatism and separatism, that we often overlook the fact that if we stand together, we can work out our ideological differences in time through practice. But if we just stand here and criticize one another, our enemy is unified and they're not stopping. So, in order to fight oppression, we really need to stand together and come to the table to reach a higher point of unity so that we can get down like the Panthers did in the 60s, and actually start creating some alternative forms of power, build up that dual power.
Wow, that's a great answer. Actually, most of the questions I had prepared, you just went into answering them. Um, Before I even got to it, I was gonna your story. I got that from you. I was gonna ask you a little bit about your ideology, how it developed, some of your current work, and you just went right into that. Um, Maybe you
Sorry.
could tell us a little bit more. No, right on it. It looks good. You were broke up for a little bit, but it came back. I think folks can hear you. We got a few people watching, and this is going to go on the YouTube later. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more of your work in the current era, and like what does it mean this revolt against the lynching of George Floyd, and like some of the organizing you've done in this current period, and kind of your perspective on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so right now, one of the things we're really trying to bring to the forefront, is unifying the various struggles. You know, um, like right now, I'm headed to Baton Rouge in order to help the family of Alton Sterling reopen this case and take to the streets to bring more attention to that, um, so that we don't forget. Because we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of his murder. Um, and we want people to recognize that this is systemic racism and oppression, right? This is a white supremacist system. And we have to come together, black, brown, and white, all oppressed people, to fight this issue, because it's not just about the people that are murdered by police, but the negligence of police. One of the dear families that we work with is the family of Kaya Taylor and Veronica Reyes, who were two women that were abducted or disappeared, and the police have destroyed evidence. They have failed to investigate, and they have neglected the families, leaving them to just deal with the trauma. And part of understanding what we need to do is to tie that struggle with the struggle of those murdered by police, to tie the various aspects of oppression together, so that we can not only attack the police and say, we want to attack one of the aspects of oppression, but we want to attack this system in general. So, aside from, going to demonstrations and protests and providing security, it's also about building up the 10-point program. Because as Huey P. Newton said, and as the Panthers do today, we really also need to understand that until we get to the point of revolution, in a more confrontational understanding, I guess we could say, we have to build survival programs, because we need to survive this oppression. So, that involves having our own education, that teaches us our true history and our place in the world today. That involves having community control of technology and resources, healthcare for our oppressed communities, um, and all these different things and programs that need to come together so that we can survive and build forward to raise the consciousness of the people we're serving. Because we have a mass line, and it's the same mass line, a mile, from the masses to the masses. And that just basically, it is what it sounds like, right? Like, we have to listen to the people and put forth their interests, and not just the immediate interests, but the long-term interests of having people's power. That's why in the Panthers we always say and greet each other and leave situations by saying all power to the people, because that's at the core of our belief. And I wake up and go to bed every day thinking that, and it's all filled with the Panther love and solidarity, and some of the more immediate works we've been doing. Like, recently, we went to a protest out at Lake CI, where Christopher Howell was just, I believe, last week murdered by a CO, um, in brutal, horrific fashion. And we also have to understand that prison abolition is a part of this as well, because like I said, this is a systemic issue, and all these different institutions, like the prison industrial complex, the police, they're all methods of aggressive oppression, and very violent. So we're out there fighting, to bring the voice to those incarcerated still, because there's thousands and thousands of political prisoners in the United States, and we cannot neglect them, because they're a part of our struggle. Many of the original Black Panthers are still in prison today, and we're not just calling for the freedom of one individual, but the freedom of everybody, because we can't believe that this system could ever provide a fair trial for any human being, because it's diametrically opposed to us. So if you so happen to be born black, brown, trans, or poor in general, you're automatically guilty of whatever they want to charge you with. And we're trying to change the narrative and take back control of the power that was stolen from us, and say we're done with these institutions. They don't represent us. We don't believe in them. We don't need the police. We'll take care of ourselves. So we're doing everything, like the prison abolition, uniting the stolen lives with the disappeared people, because a lot of people underestimate the fact that thousands of people go missing in Florida alone. You know, like this is, I believe it was the third largest state for human trafficking, um, and it's just ridiculous, you know. And all these cases go unsolved, and the families are left to endure with the trauma, and the police do nothing. They can afford to go out into the streets, tear gas, and shoot rubber bullets at protesters, but they can't afford to listen to the pleas of families. So what we say is, you know what? All right, if the police want to actually do their job, go ahead, do it. We're not going to rely on that. We're not going to have faith in that. We're going to start now. You know, we're going to start doing work right now to take control in our own hands and get things done, because we're tired of waiting for this system to do anything. And I know some people still believe that it can be salvaged, but we would argue, you know, it can't be, because it was never, ever in place for our benefit. I mean, you go back to, you know, Abraham Lincoln. You know, as one of the famed, presidents of the United States, right? People always hold him up as this huge character in freeing the slaves, but he never really did free the slaves, did he? He just transformed slavery. The 13th Amendment permits slavery to continue in the razor wire plantations, otherwise known as concentration camps, prisons. It's the same thing, because they're all that instrument of oppression, and they're all this horrific institution that just allows things to perpetuate. And even outside of there, we're wage slaves. You know, we don't really have freedom. Our entire day is controlled by having to earn an income so that we can just survive. And even when you're not at work for your 8 hours, you go home and you plan accordingly, because you got to take into account, you got to go to sleep. If you're going on vacation, where you can go and what you can do and for how long is based on your work schedule. So they don't just have us, under lock and key when we're at the workplace clocked in. They got us, like constantly in this revolving door of, wage slavery. So not much has changed, and we're still fighting for liberation, for all oppressed people. And that's why when we go out there to do things like what I'm doing right now, going out to Baton Rouge, we keep in the back of our mind that, this is a part of what we need to do, build up this revolution and raise consciousness and provide a voice for those who are tired of listening to the rhetoric about just go out and vote, because what has it done historically for us, right? Like, what has it done?
Wait. Things aren't going to get better if we just don't vote Biden in. Ain't going to help.
I would argue that they're not.
So how do we deal with that narrative? We got people out in the street with us coming out there, trying to like push the Democrats on us. How do we deal with that?
Well, I assume there's different ways that different people decide to deal with it, but I would say that one of the one of the ways that I see as effective is, just saying, okay, like, let's look at who Biden is, right? He's basically the same thing as Trump. He's just another face, just like Abraham Lincoln was another face of any other president. He wasn't really having the interests of the people at heart. And it all ties back into something that Chairman Fred Hampton said, and that was, it's a class struggle, God damn it, right? This is a class struggle, and we have to recognize that voting is in the interests of our oppressor, because it gives the illusion that we have a choice. And we may have the choice to pick what, what is the face of oppression. Either Biden's going to oppress us, they're going to murder our black and brown children, or Trump is. But both of them are going to do the same shit as it says in the new African Black Panther Party 10 American Freedom. point program, and then to take control of, you know, our technology and getting rid of all these divisions. And it's not going to happen overnight. And people say, you know, well, you vote, you get that satisfaction, you go home, you get your little sticker, you slap it right there and say, I voted today, you know, look at me, I did my part. It's not enough, right? Perpetuate oppression. So, you know, we can build voting so that we can work together on projects that are going to time we can just, you know, dictate for the and we would struggle with them to raise the understanding that, you know, if we want to take the interests of the people to heart, we have to listen and we have to look at the material conditions, because we can't be dogmatic and just read a book and say this is how it has to be done because that's how they did it. We got to look at things and say, okay, this is how the situation is. This is the various contradictions within our society. And you can look at that at a local level or generalize it at a higher level. But you look at these contradictions, you have your principal contradiction, your secondary, and so on and so forth. Like Mao said, you know, like at a suitable temperature, an egg will turn into a chicken, but at no temperature will a stone turn into a chicken, right? Internal contradictions have to be addressed as principle, and we need to move towards building that understanding in people. And you know, voting is just not going to ever provide us with any meaningful win.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I'd like to make this channel I got here, Anti-Imperialist America. I'd like to focus on like the international struggle. Like, how would you say that the struggles of poor black and brown here and the belly of the beast, how does that relate with the struggles of the people in Venezuela and Nicaragua and other anti-imperialist countries, uh, Iraq, Afghanistan, people that this country is going to war with? Like, how can we like build solidarity and organize and give people here on a more international level? And how does that oppression relate with each other?
Um, I can't hear you. It kind of broke up a little bit. I don't think my signal's too good.
Okay, okay. Um, so I was saying is, how does the oppression of poor black and brown in the United States relate to the oppression of people around the world? How can we stand in solidarity with the global South as revolutionaries in the United States?
I only caught part of that because I think I'm going where we're going through right now. I don't have a whole lot of signal. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think I, you were talking about. I think I heard, how does oppression. It looks like I got the connection back now.
Okay, so just quick question: how do the oppression of poor black and brown in the United States relate to the oppression of the global South in the international situation?
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So yeah, we have to see imperialism as something which has developed to a point where now other nations are no longer meeting the characteristics of being able to be defined as nations in and of themselves, right? Because they don't have their own common, you know, in many situations, their own common language. They don't have their own uh, national boundaries. They don't have control of their natural resources, um, and in many ways, you know, they're just spread out and uh, decimated. So when we look at U.S. imperialism, it has fundamentally reshaped the world, and we call this reactionary intercommunalism. And what that means is that basically U.S. imperialism has its hand in the pot of everything. And no matter what another nation does, it still is a part of this global capitalist imperialist system. So the principal contradiction being U.S. imperialism, we have to break that reactionary intercommunalism, and we do that, by promoting the struggles of the various marginalized communities throughout the world, and also actively taking to heart the fact that we have to fight here too, because a lot of people make the mistake of saying, well, in the United States you can't have a revolution because it's too powerful. But we look at all the historical examples of why that's false. You just look at Cuba, where Fidel was exiled. One second. Fidel was exiled.
Oh, you gotta.
Came back with revolutionaries. They were decimated, left with 12. Marched up into the mountains, and then almost 2 years later, they were taking Havana, with 3,000 people. Again, at that time, Cuba had one of the largest, most developed military forces in the South. So, we could do anything, but the people, the masses, are the motive force of history. And if we fight to break U.S. imperialism strongholds on the world, in unity with the struggles abroad in the global south, in Asia, Africa, everywhere, then what we're going to see is that we break this reactionary intercommunalism and use the ties established to build up socialism. And, not just socialism in one country, but socialism everywhere. And that's not to say that socialism can't exist in one country. I'm not a Trotskyist, but I mean, like, we have to recognize our struggle is interconnected struggle everywhere else. And in order to address it, we have to work together. We have to have unity.
Your audio seemed to have gone out. I'm having people here. We're having trouble hearing you. All right. If you can hear this, I think we're going to end it. So I'm having trouble hearing your audio. If you can hear this, I'll just go ahead and I want to say thank you for all the work you're doing out there, hitting the street, boots on the ground. Absolutely beautiful. And thanks for taking this time to do this interview. And maybe we could do this again sometime. Thank you, and I'll go with y'all salute. All power to the people, comrade.